Hello and welcome aboard another episode of the Talkin Texans podcast, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I am Paul Gallant. Joining me as always is Texans beat reporter for ESPN, DJ Bien May. DJ, the Houston Texans draft is done, and it was very eventful from the start. CJ Stroud, they trade up to get Will Anderson. Nick Caserio made 8 trades over the course of the weekend. I guess we got to just start off with the fact that they took a quarterback. We were concerned they might not. They don't get Bryce Young, but they do get CJ Stroud, and I think a lot of Texans fans are breathing a massive sigh of relief.
Yeah, man. I mean, let's whoever you believe in, whether you believe in the universe, mythical creature, God, whatever, we should all be on our knees, thanking whoever you pray to, whoever, that the fact that the Texans got a quarterback, because we all knew for the most part they couldn't go back into 2023 with Davis Mills as their starter and be able to sell fans and even some players in the locker room that they were trying to win. Again, when you have the quarterback position be as dreadful as it was in the past 2 seasons, because I believe in the past 2 seasons, the overall QBR, an ESPN stat, out of 32 teams, the Texans quarterback room ranked 31st. The only team they were above was the Carolina Panthers, who realized we need to get a quarterback too. So I'm glad they were able to get the quarterback. That kind of gave a lot of people a sigh of relief. Then we all saw what they did when they went from 12 to 3 and they got Will Anderson. And that I didn't see coming at all. And they paid a hefty price in reality. But if they feel that Will Anderson can be that double-digit sack guy that DeMeco Ryans can build this whole defense around, then I'm good with it, because you got your quarterback in the future, you got your stalwart defensive pass rusher of the future, you already have 2 very good tackles. Well, you have an elite tackle in Tunsil, you have a very good tackle in Titus Howard, and you have a talented corner in Derek Stingley. You have the majority of the premium positions taken care of, right? The first round is to use those picks to get those type of guys, because most of those guys aren't. It's hard to find them outside of the round 1. So the fact that they were able to add 2 talented players at premium positions, paired with the fact they already have guys at the other premium spots, now they can fill in the other pieces of the roster to only elevate it. The only thing you have to be concerned about in terms of the trade going forward, obviously, is they gave up their first. The only thing I care about is they gave up their first round pick next year, the Texans pick. So let's say hypothetically they're not that good, they win 3 or 4 games. Now that pick is now with the Arizona Cardinals. So that's something that people can view that as a dangerous game in that capacity. But life is all about risk. Life is all about swings, big swings, and I'm good with it, because you're showing an aggression that you're trying to accelerate the rebuild. You're not trying to slow cook it and take forever and waste everybody's time. Because how many times does that actual approach work? It's very rare for the most part. We're going to take our time. We're not going to be aggressive, and then boom, you're a good team. Nah, it's rare. Every team in the entire football league that is very good right now all took massive swings. Whether it's the Bengals, where they took Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell, where people were like, no, go get offensive tackle. Joe Burrow just blew out his knee. Go get offensive tackle. They got Jamar Chase, Super Bowl. You had the Bills, where they traded up to go get Josh Allen, and they let that start the rebuild. The Chiefs, where they traded up and they got Mahomes, and people thought, I don't know about that. He's a raw prospect. A lot of Texas Tech quarterbacks don't work out. And then look at them. They got 2 Super Bowls in 5 years under him. The Eagles, they took a massive swing when they went and they got A.J. Brown, and they drafted Jalen Hurts when they already had Carson Wentz, and they paid Carson Wentz. So it's clear. Take big swings, and you may be able to reap the benefits. Because if you don't, and you just take your sweet time and hope for the best, good luck.
I'm glad we talked about this, because that has been the big controversy over what the Texans did. Mm-hmm. When I did my show on Friday, my immediate reaction was, hey, I'm happy. I don't really care what they gave up, but I figured a couple of days later I would be looking at it through a slightly more critical lens, because they did give up a lot. You mentioned it was a first-round pick next year, their own first-round pick, which theoretically should be worse than that of the Browns, given that Deshaun Watson's probably going to be there the entirety of next year. And then on top of that, You give up the early second-round pick, the 1 second-round pick that at least until you made some trades that you had going into this weekend. And then on top of that, you traded a third-round pick too. It was a lot. But I am with you in that. I think that there's too many people out there, DJ, that assume if you have a ton of picks, you are going to hit on all of those picks. And it gives you more of a chance, but you don't often hit on them. And to talk about other trades in the past, do you think that the Titans, when they traded out one overall pick and when there were those trade ups in 2016 to get Jared Goff and Carson Wentz, do you think that the haul that those teams got in return, and instead of exchanging, instead of taking a quarterback, do you think that they absolutely nailed that haul? Because it looks great on paper, but a couple of years later, then you're like, oh, wait, it didn't really work out the way that they thought it would.
Right, and I can go to another team, that kind of hits a little bit closer to home. The Miami Dolphins, I believe, when they traded away Minkah Fitzpatrick and they traded away Tunsil in 2020. Well, when they had 3 first-round, so when they had 3 first-round picks in 2020, the first-round pick which was theirs was Tua. Now he looks like a good quarterback. Their second first-round pick was Austin Jackson, who was a left tackle. He's played left guard in the league and he's played right tackle. And they're probably gonna decline the 5th-year option, so that didn't work out. And then their other first-round pick was Noah Eganagadi, the cornerback out of Auburn, and he can't even make the roster. Like he can't. Like, he's barely. Most games he's inactive. So and then we can go to Raiders when they had all those first-round draft picks, and the only one out of that entire crop is Josh Jacobs. Now, as you mentioned eloquently, when you have more picks, it gives you more opportunities because it's a crapshoot. But we're talking about Will Anderson, man. Will Anderson was one of the best college players we've seen in a long time coming off the edge, right? Like his stat lines look absolutely bonkers. He had almost 60 tackles for loss in 3 years. Almost 60, 58.5. And then he had 34 sacks in 3 seasons, right? And we all seen that if you can rush the passer in college at a high level, especially in the SEC, that's going to be able to translate for the most part, right? Most guys that we viewed as they look like they can't miss, they're going to be able to get you a lot of sacks and not really pan out initially is Chase Young, and that has more to do with injury. So, again, Will Anderson is going to be a good player for the Texans. The Texans thought they can get 2 elite prospects in their eyes to go forward. You know what I'm saying? Right. To help accelerate this rebuild, because I know, they went 3-13-1 and the roster on paper wasn't as good at the end of last year, but they added a lot of pieces that could make you think that they can be possibly a 6-7 win type of team, because now they have the quarterback of the future who's extremely talented. They have a good offensive line. They have a good running. They're going to have a good running game with a good running back in the backfield. You have a really good tight end who was top 7 in a plethora of categories from 2019 to 2023. Dalton Schultz, right? Like they're in a very promising spot. Now, if Will can't play and if the Texans are bad next year, now the trade looks terrible. But we can also do it the opposite way. Let's say that Will Anderson is really good, and let's say the Texans win 8 games next year. Now that draft pick is going to be in the teens instead of in the top 10 or the top 5, right? We could play this hypothetical game until we're blue and black and whatever the cliche is. I don't know what it is. What is it? Blue in the face?
Blue in the face.
Blue in the face. There we go. Blue in the face. I
blew myself from Tobias Funk in Arrested Development.
And then, we could play the hypothetical game until the games are played. And I have to give Nick Caserio a lot of credit for this in the sense that he understands that too. That's why he's not going to really be too high or too low. He's like, every time you ask him about, how would you even grade your draft? He's like, you guys haven't even played a snap yet. Like, how could we grade anything, So, yeah, man, I understand all the potential hypotheticals of what things can be, but if CJ can play and Will Anderson is close to what we think he was in college coming out, and he can, get after the passer and get you some sacks and things like 10, close to 10 sacks, that's a win. You know what I'm saying? Because in the AFC, you're going to need pass rushers, quarterbacks, and weapons and cornerbacks. That's what you need the most in the AFC, more than the NFC. You know what I'm saying? Because you got to do it with Mahomes, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Tua, Lamar, Rodgers. The list goes on and on and on. So that's where I'm at.
I'm on the same page as you. And I look at draft picks as currency. I don't look at draft picks as lottery tickets that will cash in. They are
Right.
essentially lottery tickets. And Nick Caserio clearly looks at them from a perspective of, hey, I can use these to get what I want. And
Right.
we'll see. We'll see with both Will Anderson and CJ Stroud. I'm right in the middle. Like I understand conceptually what they're trying to do. Anderson, it's not just what he does as a player. They have been talking up the man that he is, the leader that he is. And I mean, if you go through the first 5 picks that the Texans made, all those guys were captains in their last year, which is rather consistent with what Nick Caserio and honestly what the Patriots used to do. They drafted a ton of captains over the years. They like to bring in smart guys who are, I guess, accountable in their eyes for that fact. But we're at a spot right now where, to go to grading picks right now, I hate this part, DJ, of the post-draft process because it's not just that everyone assumes picks were good or bad off of the millions of mock drafts that were taking place over the couple of months before. There's also this dynamic where everyone starts grading these picks, but everyone's too much of a coward to actually grade worse than a C minus. I just looked up and down at draft grade rankings, DJ. There is not one person that had the balls to give somebody an F. No one got an F. Someone has to get an F. What is this participation trophy culture? This is some amateur hour stuff. These teachers are making it too easy. I want someone to lay a big meaty F on some team. Texas got a B plus, I think, on most of them. We don't know how it's going to play out. What we can try to figure out is what was their plan going into it and what kind of players does Nick Caserio like? Because now, DJ, we have 2 drafts to go off of, as opposed to the weird one where, Davis Mills is your first pick a couple years back.
Right. I mean, to be fair, when you talk about mock draft grades, I think it's NBC Sports, something like that. They had a tweet, and the Texans got a D minus. So you got your hard grade.
Okay,
you got your hard grade.
Hell yeah.
You got your hard grade.
Someone has to do it. It just drives me crazy. They can't all be good. I don't get that.
And they won't all be good. They won't all be good.
Exactly.
It's so funny. I was talking to my mentor, Bob Gabbard. He just retired not too long ago last year. He was bragging about how he didn't have to work, this past draft for the first time in forever. But we were laughing about the fact that prior to the draft, we spent all this time looking at these prospects, talking about these prospects, saying, can they play? Can't they play? Prior to the draft, they get drafted. In about 2-3 years, most of the guys, half of the guys might not even be in the league anymore. You know what I'm saying? Another quarter might not be able to play. It's only gonna be like a few that can actually really legitimately impact a franchise, Because again, every fan base, whatever the draft is, for the most part, apparently I was looking at Tennessee Twitter, apparently Titans Twitter, apparently they're not really feeling those draft picks. But the majority of fans believe that they had a very good draft. All the picks are going to be impact players, yada, yada, yada. I've seen it left and right. Most times, the drafts, you'll be lucky if you can get 2 starters. And that should be a win. If you get 2 starters out of that draft,
100%
that's
right.
excellent. That's excellent. Because most of these guys will not be impact players for your roster in a couple of years. It's just how it goes. The NFL is just too hard. That's why it's the hardest football league in the world, for the most part. It's the hardest, So that's my mini rant on mock drafts.
But it's smart. You're on point here. I did an article when I was up in Seattle, and I got really nerdy, put together an Excel spreadsheet, and I took a look at every single first round draft pick from 2012 through 2015. And here's the results. The average first round pick started in 80.3% of the games they played in. 13.28% earned at least one first team All-Pro honor. And it's funny, we look at a first round pick, that's almost the expectation, it seems like, with some of these guys when they're drafted in the first round, which is completely unfair. This is the biggest night of a lot of these guys' careers, and we're of the belief that, hey, this guy is going to be X, Y, or Z. How about he just be a starter? 15% got at least one second team All-Pro, 39% got at least one Pro Bowl, 61% had their 5th-year option picked up, 40% got an extension, 21% were traded. So you look at that, and obviously from the top of the first round to the bottom of the first round, expectations widely vary. But I think that if you're looking honestly at first-round picks, you're just hoping that the guy's going to be a starter. It's a little bit different, though, when it's a quarterback, and it's a little bit different, too, when you trade up a lot to get Will Anderson. So, I mean, there's a lot of pressure right now on Nick Caserio and obviously those two players to succeed, because if they don't, Caserio could be looking for work, and the Texans could be looking for yet another general manager.
Yeah, no, you're 150% correct about that. That's why, I have no issue with Nick Caserio taking that risk and going for the, trying to get two what they view as two elite prospects. Because in reality, if they would have taken Will first, like they would have given up more to get up to number 3. And they probably don't even end up getting a quarterback at 3 because they probably would have got outbidded, right? Because to move up to 3 was probably going to take multiple first round picks. It wasn't going to take. It was going to maybe 3. Because I remember when Miami and San Fran did they trade to get number 3 so San Fran could take Trey Lance? They had to give up 3 first round picks.
Yeah,
like that's the entry point to get there is 3 first round picks. Like that's kind of how that works. Even with Carolina, where they gave up multiple first round picks, I don't think they technically gave up 3. Somebody can fact check this. I don't know if they didn't give up 3. But they got DJ Moore, who was a former first-round pick. So, if you want to move up to that point, you're going to have to give a lot up to get to number 3. So, they were going to probably give up more. Them taking CJ basically reduced the price that you were going to have to give up. And they probably didn't think they were going to get a player as good as Will or CJ at 12 or even at 33. And I respect that. I can't really be mad about that. At the end of the day, if you felt that this guy can make a legitimate impact on your roster and get you help accelerate the rebuild, because this was about accelerating the rebuild now, because now at a certain point, we can't keep taking our time with this conservative approach because we've all seen that most teams that are quote unquote conservative, it doesn't ever amount to anything. So, kudos to Caserio for having the conviction, having the guts to take a big swing. We'll see if it works in a couple of years. Because let's say CJ can't play and Will can't, and Will is just a good player. That might reset that might ruin the rebuild. But hey, you went for the swing, or reverse. CJ can be a stud, Will can be a stud, and now you can take over the AFC South.
That's what you're hoping for, of course. The Texans did have more picks over the course of the day, and as far as that Panthers trade, they traded a 9th pick, so basically a pick swap. 24 first, a 23 and 25 second, and DJ Moore. So it was a lot. They got Bryce Young. It's all going to be graded. If Bryce Young works out, no one's going to give a damn about the cost. Exactly. And I would say the same thing with Will Anderson. You could look at it from this perspective. I bet the Texans probably, if they were to compare the two of them, CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, I get the feeling that they like Will Anderson as a prospect more than they like CJ Stroud as a prospect.
Right.
Look at it from this perspective. They basically traded up into that number 2 spot to take CJ Stroud. You can look at it from that perspective too. The expensive cost of moving up, because I think they wanted to take Anderson there. I did have a bit of a conspiracy, DJ, and I wanted to get your take on this.
I'm listening.
So there was an idea that perhaps Nick Caserio maybe was going to leave after the draft. Where that came from, I don't know. I also know that in the days right before the draft, Jonathan Alexander of the Houston Chronicles said that he had been hearing that the Texans were doing some more research on CJ Stroud than they had been in prior weeks. I am wondering if perhaps ownership pushed for CJ Stroud to be taken 2nd overall, and then the compromise that maybe they made with Caserio with Nico Ryan was, all right, you get the quarterback, you also have the green light to trade up, get Will Anderson, who clearly you wanted. I mean, they were basically doing a rave dance when they selected Anderson. They were so pumped. What do you think about that conspiracy theory? I don't have a tinfoil hat on right now, but just imagine this one there.
You don't have a tinfoil hat on, figuratively or literally. I do think that they wanted both for the most part. Because again, as we opened the discussion, right, they couldn't go back into 2023 with the quarterback situation being what it was. It was just going to be really hard to do that. But, I've had people tell me that the ownership didn't force the CJ Stroud pick. I've had multiple people tell me that. So at the end of the day, could they be lying to me? Maybe. But I think I can only go off of what I've been told, right?
Right, exactly. It could have happened, and they might be telling you that too. You never know.
Right. So, I mean, I've been told that never happened. that Kyle was a lot more laid back compared to Bob McNair in the sense of having more of a heavy hand. So, when it comes to drafts and things of that nature. So, um, I like the theory though. I like the theory for
Oh
sure. I
yeah.
like the theory. I'm here for a good conspiracy theory because then I get to either lean into it or I get to debunk it. So either way, I'm good with a good conspiracy theory.
Cool. I do have a tinfoil hat here, by the way. Look at this thing. It's an actual
that that
tinfoil hat. Right now,
that that
I
that's
couldn't put this
special.
on over the headphones. So the Texans did make more moves as well. I mean, we've talked ad nauseum about C.J. Stroud, about Will
Mhm.
Anderson, but they also drafted other players. And Nick Caserio had a very busy day. 8 trades the Texans made. They went into the weekend with 12 picks. They only ended up making 8 picks. The first trade, a trade up into the back of the second round to take a center, Juice Scruggs out of Penn State. Big fan of the first name. Did think it was kind of funny that Brian Cushing was announcing a pick with the first name Juice. You could read between the lines on that one. This is a guy who played at Penn State,
Oh my God.
who obviously was a captain there. And this is also a player that you look at the interior of the offensive line, you are hoping that he is going to solidify the middle, which was a weird place last year, wasn't it? I
Right.
mean, with Justin Britt's disappearance after week 1 with no real explanation, and then what they were trying to do, DJ at center afterwards, this hopefully gives you some stability there. Drafting, though, a center in the second round hasn't necessarily worked out all the time for the Houston Texans. If you go back to 2014, Xavier Su'a-Filo was like a guard center. Nick Martin out of Notre Dame, also a center. Hopefully this time is different.
Yeah. They had to add there, right? Because Scott Quessenberry last year had a pass block win rate of 86 last year, which obviously you just hit a number. You don't like you might think that's good. You have no idea what that number is. So let me give some context. That was 40, ranked 40th among centers.
Oof.
And then and with a run block win rate of 66, which was 36th
Oh,
in
boy.
the yeah.
That's
So
very bad.
yeah, so there's only one center on the field. So, you know, 32 starters.
Yeah.
So I'll
Let's
let you guys, read in between those lines. You know what I mean? So again, they had to add there. And you saw that they even added later on when they got the kid from Notre Dame, Patterson, Jared
Yes.
Patterson. So I was good with, them adding to the position. Like, granted, I had somebody tell me, somebody that really, really follows the draft and follows the interior lineman, since he played in the league and was a defensive end. He was just telling me that, they might have reached a little bit, they could have waited a little bit, but if they felt that they didn't have to, they couldn't. And that's the guy that they really targeted that would fit their scheme. I'm good with that. You know what I mean? Like I'm really good with that. In this system, since he's gonna play with Tunsil at left tackle and Titus Howard at right tackle, paired with Shaq Mason at right guard, and Kenyon Green, who has a lot of talent at left guard, like there won't be as much for him to do in the sense of like heavy lifting because you're around good players. I mean, we all know like if you and I have a good producer, we have two good producers behind us. That's gonna make our job easier. You know what I'm saying? Look at me, showing out the love to Joe and Jared. But
Yeah.
if we have good producers, that's gonna make our life easier. If a center has good players around him, that's gonna make his life easy. Same with a quarterback. If he has good receivers around him, it's gonna make his life easy. Same with a running back. If the O-line is blocking for him, his life gets easier. So I'm good with the pick, because again, like I can't give too much in-depth analysis in terms of how he looked at Penn State and things of that nature. I'll be a phony. I'll be a liar. If I was like, oh yeah, I was really grinding the tape on Juice Scruggs out of Penn State.
I
I
wasn't.
was not.
Just like his name.
You're right. I'm just kind of leaning on the Texans' evaluation, paired with the fact that he's going to be playing around some really good offensive linemen, a really good offensive line, a talented offensive line, and kind of go from there. So that's kind of, I mean, like the Texans' offensive line has 4 first round. Shaq Mason was a first round pick, right?
He was.
So they have 4 first round picks on the offensive line. So that's
The Shaq Mason trade is a forgotten move.
but
And
it's a
that
good
is a
move.
big, big factor, I think, in okay, you got Kenyon Green who struggled last year. You got another guy in the middle who is probably going to take his lumps his first season, but I would assume you
Right.
can pen him in as starting center. but to have Shaq Mason around, conceptually, that's a great person to have on that interior because it was very, very rough last season.
Exactly. So I'm good with that move. Them trading up. I mean, they didn't really give up too much, apart from some back end picks. I mean, most of the back end picks, those guys don't make the roster most of the time, so it's not even like.
And they had so many back end picks.
Right. I'm not gonna get up in a tizzy about that. And they traded away. I mean, they traded away the what I really loved about it. So he traded away the Mr. Irrelevant pick because I was going to write about that, and I ain't gonna write about Mr. Irrelevant. That's just me.
Tank Dell, the next player that the Texans selected early in the 3rd round. If you are from Houston, you would know that he played for the Cougs. And at pick 69, the Texans got a guy who scored and scored and scored some more. 109 catches, 1,398 yards, and 17 touchdowns last year. He's small, and conceptually, you could use him in a lot of different ways. Houston's had some very fast, skilled players that have found their way into the league over the last couple of years. Right. You're hoping that this is a guy that they can turn into some sort of gadget player, slot wide receiver, or something like that, adding him to a core of whoever's the number 1 wide receiver. I'm honestly, DJ, at this point in time, not sure. I would assume it's Nico Collins. And then after that, John Mechie III coming in after essentially a redshirt year. You hope that he's healthy. But Tank Dell's certainly going to have an opportunity to touch the football this coming year.
Yeah, I mean, Tank Dell, I'm already going to be a little bit biased towards him. He's a JUCO guy. So, I'm a JUCO guy. Jaron, our producer, is a JUCO guy. So we know how hard junior college is, how to get out of junior. Like, we always see like the finished product, like a Tank Dell where he made it all the way getting drafted, But like there's a ton of guys that go JUCO that never even sniff a phone call from a college coach. So the fact that he was able to make it out of Independence College and make it to Houston and make an immediate impact, that's a win. So I'm going to be rooting for him because, again, like I'm always in pro JUCO guys. Regardless of if that compromises my quote-unquote journalistic integrity, bump that. But going to the football player, obviously, he's really good he has really good routes. He separates at a very high level. My only concern is whatever the expectation is going to be on him, right? Like if you're expecting him to come in and be your number 1 wide receiver year 1, that's going to be a little tricky, right? Because he's 5'8", 165. And guys at that size usually don't hit the ground running immediately. Like it's like an adjustment period of getting used to the physicality that you're going to deal with, and the better competition, right? Because he played at Houston, and the majority of the competition he went against was the AAC conference, which has good players, but that's not comparable to like the SEC, which you're going to see a plethora of NFL cornerbacks week in and week out. But again, I'm good with the pick because he can bring a level of explosiveness to the offense that they're lacking. Not that they're lacking per se, but he's gonna, because again, Mechie can fly and Mechie can create some of that. But you're just adding more to that. And if Bobby Slow is a creative, you could see him being able to put him in position to make a lot of plays. If he could use him similar to, I'm about to not date myself, but I'm about to go back to 2021 when I covered the Jets. If he can use him similar to how Mike LaFleur, the Jets offensive coordinator, used Braxton Berrios, which got him paid in 2021, which can get him some production where he's using a gadget player, obviously in the pass game, run game, reverses, things like that. Really being creative to get him the ball in space to create those explosives. Now you're going to be able to get some value out of that pick, right? Especially in year 1. I'm just talking about year 1 because Tank could easily develop into being a very productive slot receiver that can play outside also. So I'm talking about just for year 1, right? Where you're gonna, get him some jet sweeps, get him some motion, but you gotta get him on the edge though, because if you get him up in the middle, let's say you put him in the back. I've seen people talking about put him in the backfield. That's crazy. He's 165. They might break his neck. We don't need that. Get him on the edge, get him in space, utilize him similarly to how Braxton and to a lesser extent Michael Ford used Elijah Moore on some of those gadget plays. You'll be able to get immediate production, or similar to how the Arizona Cardinals used Rondale Moore his first couple years.
That excites me.
Right, So that's kind of where I'm at, especially for the first year, where you kind of want to, find what your rookie's strengths are and really maximize that and abuse whatever those strengths are, so they can get confidence, so they can be able to make plays and things of that nature, and they can have an impact versus trying to make them something that they're not, right? Because let's say, like, hypothetically, like they want to put them on outside at X and have them on the line of scrimmage and have them deal with press all game long. That's not the most effective way to utilize him as a rookie. So that's kind of
Right.
where I'm at with the Tank Dell pick.
Bobby Slowik's creativity, this is where he gets to either highlight it or show that maybe he doesn't have that much. So we'll see what he does. But moving into the edge, jet sweeps, bubble screens, stuff like that. That's what, at the very least, I would assume, the same as you, DJ, he would be used to do at first. Going through the rest of the picks, once you get into round 4, I think it is very difficult to have really strong opinions.
Right.
This is where you win the draft. That's all I know.
That's
Some
true.
of these guys end up being home runs. So round 4, DJ, the Texans took out of TCU, Dylan Horton, a defensive lineman. I remember seeing the picture that was posted. He looks like a big guy. I think we can both agree they did not have nearly enough big guys last year. Their defensive line was sorry last year. It just was getting pushed around over and over again. And you got to help out the linebackers. The best way to help out linebackers is to bolster that core. I think maybe one of the more disappointing elements of this draft, and while I did like, you get Will Anderson and you get CJ Stroud, I was hoping for maybe some more defensive linemen, because I do think that they're missing so many. Obviously, they did add Sheldon Rankin this offseason, so it's not like there's nobody there. But Sheldon. Dylan Horton was the second defensive lineman that the Houston Texans drafted, and we'll see what he's able to do year 1.
Yep. I mean, it was last year at TCU. He had 15 and a half sacks, 15 tackles for loss, 4 pass deflections, and a forced fumble. So you add that type of depth, as you said, like, this is where you win the draft. And as you already alluded to, they had to add more players. I mean, they had to add more beef on the defensive line overall. Now when you look at the defensive line, you have Bernard, you have Will Anderson, you have Jerry Hughes, you have Sheldon Rankins, you have Malik Collins, and you have some other guys like Lopez and things like that. Now you add Orton to that. So like, now that there's more depth, there's a little more talent. I really like Malik Collins. Like, their run defense was obviously 6th worst ever in NFL history in terms of yards allowed. Like, that's statistically like fact.
Is that bad?
But that's bad. But like, their worst games were happening when Malik Collins was out, because he got hurt in that Raiders game and he missed a few weeks, and that's when they're really, really, really getting gassed. But when he's out there, he can, like, he's a really good run stopper. And same with Sheldon Rankins. All the media guys are gonna love Sheldon Rankins. I know I'm getting off topic. All of them are gonna love him completely. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's a great media guy, but he's a really good player, and you're gonna be able to add that to the defensive line. Like, the defensive line looks more like last year it was more of a it was more of a negative. Now it's we're almost at that point we can say it's a positive and a strength for the team. I would say right now it's extremely solid, because again, everything's on paper. But I do think the infusion of Sheldon, Will, Orton paired with, you already having Gennard, Collins, and Hughes paired with DeMeco Ryans' defensive philosophy, I think that's only going to elevate this defensive group.
I think so as well. That's what you're looking for, and the more bodies you have, the bigger your stable on the defensive line, the better. That's why Philadelphia is where they're at. Philadelphia has a million guys on the defensive line. Also, their whole team played at Georgia, so that might be a good call as well. I can't believe they even traded for DeAndre Swift. I was like, are you serious? They're getting another Georgia guy.
I know. Insane. It was like Georgia.
The Texans, meanwhile, like to go Alabama. In round 5, they got Henry Tuo. I'm gonna butcher that a million times. This is the test run. First time I've officially said it.
I'm joining the show. It's To'o.
Yeah, I was about to say it's To'o. It's not Toto. It's To'o.
Toto.
Yeah, there you go.
Sure.
That's our guy Joe, who helps run all this. That's one of our producers that helps run all this. We need that. We need situations like that, because I'm very bad with names. Very bad with names.
Me too.
One of the Texas PR guys, I love him to death. I have his never saved my phone, but when I saw him, and he helped lead me around in the draft party. Let me go know where I need to go. I said, "Thanks, Jack. His name's Tim." His name's Tim. You know what I mean? Like Tim. Now I'm gonna call Tim. You know, when he saw me, he called me EJ. You know, instead of DJ. You know, so now I might call him Jim instead. So.
Whenever I see your last name, DJ, I get nervous that I'm going to mess it up. Every single time I'm like, wait, is it DJ Bien-Ami? Is it DJ Bien-Aimé? Is it DJ Bien-Amy? I don't know.
You're close because when I ran at the ACC Indoor Championship in 2016, when I listened to it, so 2017, when I listened to it back, the announcer said DJ Bien-Ami, and that's not even close. Not even close. So you're a lot closer than the general person. So
good. I had a high school football coach that would purposely pronounce my last name wrong because my last name's Gallant, but he would always say Gallant, and he knew he was pissing me off. Like he would make this little look. He's like, "All right, Gallant," and I'm like, I would never correct him. I'd never bother. There's no point. But he knew what he was doing there. But anyway, an Alabama linebacker who was fast.
Right.
I really like this pick. This is probably my favorite third day pick.
Really?
They had so little speed at the linebacker position last year, DJ. And in today's NFL, you got to have guys that can run. You got to have guys that can stick with running backs who are running out on routes. You got to have guys who are able to cover tight ends. You need people that can cover at linebacker. So the position's starting to get smaller and faster, and that's where he fits.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned about him being fast, he ran a 4.6 at the combine. Christian Harris has a lot of speed. D'Amico's mentioned that at the press conference. First thing he said when someone asked him about Christian Harris was speed. I mean, I know this isn't quote unquote completely comparable, but on Madden, Christian Harris doesn't have a 91. He has 91 speed. You know,
whoa.
So if you're trying to do a fantasy draft, get you Christian Harris because on Madden, if you got speed, you're good to go. But yeah, you're right about that. And in this defense, you got to be able to go sideline to sideline. You got to have enough speed, like legitimate speed, to where because the way the defensive line is, they're going to have it like it's a penetrating, get up the field type of front where they're going to try to create havoc and you're going to try to create havoc and try to force running backs to bounce outside. And when they bounce outside, you got to be able to go and get them. Yeah. Perfect example of like how fast San Fran was. I remember against the Miami Dolphins where I think two of those over route. It's not a first nine. It's not for 5 or whatever yards. It was like a flat route to Tyreek Hill, and Dre Greenlaw is going sideline to sideline, stride for stride with Tyreek Hill. I'm like, I remember I called one of my homeboys, Johnny, back home. I was like, how did the Niners get all this speed?
I know.
So it kind of goes to that. And you saw that a lot with the Jets last year, where like in terms of going sideline to sideline, they could do that with the best of them. Because they have athletes, right? They had CJ Mosley. They had Quincy Williams, I think he ran a 4.5 at his combine, paired with Quan Alexander. So when you see how those defenses look, in San Francisco and New York, that's the image that you're going to want to envision in Houston, right? So that's kind of how I see that. Swarm. I mean, D'Amico said that at the press conference.
They're killing that phrase. They're really trying to make that happen. And look, maybe it has a better chance of happening than the word fetch, but we get it. You like the word swarm. Make sure the players actually can swarm. And he does seem like somebody who will qualify for that.
Indeed.
The next pick that the Texans made, Jarrett Patterson, we mentioned him before, center out of Notre Dame. You need interior offensive line depth. Maybe that's somebody that can also be a backup guard as well. A little bit later, then they drafted Xavier Hutchinson, a wide receiver out of Iowa State, another high volume reception guy who played pretty well. My buddies who follow the Big 12 said, they got this guy in the 6th round, one of the better Iowa State players that you've seen over the last couple of years.
They don't have many.
They don't have many? They're better than they've been in years past, though. Remember when they used to have the little cardinal and the cyclone on the side of their helmet too, and then they just started ripping off USC's uniforms, like essentially the exact same uniforms as USC.
Facts. Iowa State, they got Brock, they got Brees. Brees is a dog.
Mm-hmm.
Brock is pretty good.
Yeah.
I can't think of many other good Iowa State players.
Off the top of my head, I can't either.
Excuse me for not knowing.
How do you not know Iowa State football? What the hell is wrong with you, DJ? Come on.
You have
a life?
I must go. Well, Sometimes I must go back into my cocoon. And but yeah, no, this guy you're talking about, Hutchinson, he was really productive. Another JUCO guy, and he played an hour away from at Berlin, which is an hour away from Houston. So he played there and was able to, again, another JUCO guy, another guy I'm a root for, obviously, 'cause I love JUCO guys. That was able to be there for a year, get out, go to Iowa State, and then become productive. That's another thing that people don't realize. When you go from JUCO to the next level, the next step is now establishing yourself there within that first year. Because if you don't establish yourself within that first year, they're just bringing in guys from high school that have 3-4 years under their belt that they can just use, and utilize. So, so shout out to him. I mean, he was extremely productive. He had 2,929 yards and 15 touchdowns in his 3-year career. He had 1,000 yards this last season. And I remember talking to Ari from KCPR. I don't know.
KPRC.
KPRC. I don't know. Man, those names be messing me up, man. Those names be
Say
messing me
Channel
up.
2.
But from Channel 2, let's go. I was talking to Ari from Channel 2. But he was. I ask Chance about that every time because he works there and he always tells me I always forget. But he was telling me that no, Hutchinson is a really good player. He said that was their best offensive player last year, and he's a really good football player. And when you're drafting the back end, you can either go with the high upside in terms of athletic guys because the guy that took in the 7th round, Brandon Hill, he ran a 4.4, so he's a really good athlete. Or you can just go with guys that are extremely productive football players that made a lot of plays in college. And they got a mixture of both in the back end. And that's what you really want to do, and then develop those guys into becoming contributors for your roster.
You just mentioned Brandon Hill from Pittsburgh, the athletic guy that they brought in. He's listed as a safety. We'll see what they use him as. Obviously, there's a bit of a crowded defensive back room with Derek Stingley, Steven Nelson. You bring in Jimmy Ward this offseason. Jalen Petrie still around. Will be interesting to see what that defensive back group does this year because